From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Delivery delays in the Heights will tell you why some people are waiting days for their mail.
I am concerned about the people here that need medicine.
Plus, Hysham residents confronting city and county leaders over ongoing water problems.
To walk to the water department and then carry a case of water home, that can't be done.
And as the Ag Department issues new rules for organic farms, we want to tell you what that means for operations in Montana. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Montana This Morning on this Friday, January 20th. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots of news and weather to get to, but off the top, a Billings man is behind bars this morning exactly 1 week after allegedly forcing another man into his car at gunpoint. 21-year-old Angelo Zamora faces several charges for the crime that played out last Friday on 4th Avenue South near the intersection of South 30th Street. After finding out the victim was in the car, police pulled Zamora over. The victim was freed, but Zamora took off and got away. There's footage from that incident. He was caught this week and booked on a $50,000 bond. Meanwhile, something we've been following out of Hysham. Our reporters have been making a lot of trips out there because residents are fuming over ongoing water issues. They're addressing city and county leaders as multiple problems at the treatment plant has the city under a boil order for the foreseeable future. Q2's David J. has more from the latest public meeting.
The students at the school in Hysham can't drink the water. The water fountains are turned off because the water is not drinkable. Basketball teams have to bring in their own to stay hydrated at practice. And citizens came out to hear from the DEQ and some other agencies as well as the city about some of the concerns and the possible solutions. The basketball teams in the whole town of Hysham are affected by the bad water.
Our electric or our gas bill or whatever, that's going to go up too because people are going to have water. And if you have to boil it to sterilize it, and you can't wash dishes or do anything else without hot water, so there goes more, output.
But to walk to the water department and then carry a case of water home, that can't be done. I'm in okay health. I can't do it.
I would like to start out with kind of some of the rumors that have gotten to us.
Hysham Mayor Larry Fink explained the water rates. He also said that the city did not apply for FEMA funds because floods did not cause the problems. And he said a water main did not break, but there was a computer problem.
We charge no one overage. Whatever the base rate was, that's what it is.
Public should have been notified.
They're the one that's supposed to take care of us.
You flush that toilet and it looks like somebody boiled coffee.
Citizens expressed their concerns to representatives from the city, the county health department, and the Department of Environmental Quality.
So it is a maintenance issue.
One resident said he was satisfied with what he heard.
I wanted to come and find out about some of the pathogens or whatever could be floating in our water. And, they did a good job of answering that.
The DEQ says it has a 90-day plan to take care of the water and also is working on a long-term plan. In Hysham, David J., MTN News.
We'll continue following that. Next 90 days, boil order in Hysham, and more developments there to come, I'm sure. And also developments in the weather world because it's been warm this January, but it's not going to stay that way.
No, it looks like we're going to try to cool down a little bit for the weekend, and we have a chance of seeing some snow, some much needed moisture possibly on the way. It's been a very dry start to the brand new year. We'll show you that with totals here in just a second. It was warmer than average again yesterday, almost a good 10 degrees above the norm with our high about 5 degrees above the norm with our low, so 45 and 23 respectively. Of course, another dry day yesterday. How are we doing with those moisture totals? Not that good, continuing to slide backward. Snow totals well below average where we should be for this time of the season. Latest drought monitor came out yesterday. Continues to get drier here in portions of Yellowstone County. Across the Q2 viewing area, for those who do have drought conditions, we're looking at dry to moderate. Up there in the north along the High Line, though, extreme conditions. How's it doing for the snowpack? Well, you can see some areas there shaded in yellow where we've got some work to do. Now, it's still early in the season, so no freaking out yet, but I'd just like to show these numbers because I get requests for it. So for those who are needing to know what the snowpack is, there you go. But hang in there. Hopefully we'll see some changes as we get into the latter part of the weekend. And the outlooks are showing moving forward, at least at the 1st of February, we're leaning wetter than average, so that could be some good news. Temperatures out there right now, we're sitting at 30 at the airport. Feels like 21. Winds out the southwest at about 12 miles an hour. We're in the 20s and some 30s this morning, even some teens on our way to highs today in the 30s and 40s for the most part. A complete look at your forecast straight ahead, so don't go anywhere.
Okay, Miller, thank you so much. We'll check back with him in a bit. Anger and frustration this morning from people living in the Billings Heights. Many say they aren't getting their mail on time, with deliveries reaching mailboxes just once a week in some instances. Q2's Charlie Kleps looks into what's going on.
It's something most people do every day, walk down to their mailbox to pick up the day's deliveries. But imagine getting there and finding nothing, a mailbox that's completely empty for days in a row. That's been the reality for people all over the city of Billings this past week. Most of us take the mail for granted. It shows up like clockwork each and every day. So when it doesn't, it's noticeable, especially here at the Aspen Grove Senior Apartment Complex in the Heights.
The complex got mail once in the last week.
Carol Bates has lived at Aspen Grove for 2 years. She spends most of her days in this wheelchair, and like many who live here, she depends on the mail more than most.
I personally have trouble going places, so I order tons of stuff to be delivered to me. I can only carry so much on my chair.
Thursday was a good day. The mail had finally arrived.
My cord went out for my computer system, so I had to get a different cord.
But for the past 5 days, she says the mailman never even showed up.
We have a lot of people that take a lot of medications, and their medications come, a lot of them, by mail.
Billings isn't the only city reporting mail mayhem. Residents of Bozeman and Missoula have reported similar frustrations with the mail being delivered this week. Kimberly Frum, a spokesperson with USPS, said this week in a quote, "The Postal Service is not immune from the staffing challenges and hiring challenges that nearly every industry across the country is facing." MTN reached out to the post office's spokesperson here in Billings, but multiple calls were not returned.
That's not something that's safe for people. We need to get mail more than once a week.
She's hopeful it will continue to arrive on time, not just for her sake, but for her neighbors at the complex.
It's inconvenient if it's something you need immediately. You know, this wasn't something I needed immediately, but I am concerned about the people that need medicine.
In Billings, Charlie Kleps, MTN News.
Thank you, Charlie. We'll continue following that. Now to some important news for Montana's organic farmers. Pay attention if you're a farmer here. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is increasing regulations on organic products. This is happening for the first time in more than 30 years. One change requires labels for organic products to list every single ingredient that qualifies as organic. In another update that could really impact farms in Montana, the USDA is increasing authority for more rigorous on-site inspections of certified operations. According to a 2019 study from Commodity.com, there are more than 200 organic farms in Montana, spanning over 355,000 acres. Organic farmers in Montana brought in more than $65 million in 2019. This is a big operation. The USDA rule changes go into effect on March 20th. Anybody affected will have a year to comply with those changes. There's several other updates to this rule that could impact you if you are doing organic farming here. Head to USDA.gov for the full list. And happening today, people who oppose abortion are gathering in Washington for this year's annual March for Life. For 50 years, the march has been scheduled on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. However, with the Supreme Court overturning that ruling last year, we were curious, what's the purpose of the march now? Reporter Joe St. George takes a closer look.
Marches down the middle of the street happen all the time in Washington. There are small marches around the Capitol over immigration. There are big marches like the Progressive Women's March back in 2017. Conservative marches like the Tea Party March on Washington back in 2009. Many marches come and go, but one march has happened every year since 1974, the anti-abortion march known as the March for Life. For years, it was all about overturning Roe v. Wade.
Roe may be overturned. It's just different now.
Meet Mark Harrington, an opponent of abortion and an activist who will be among the thousands marching Friday in Washington. He says the reason this march is still happening is because the Supreme Court last year didn't end the debate over abortion. They just evolved it. This year's march won't be going to the Supreme Court like previous years. Instead, it's heading to the Capitol, where it's unclear how Congress will handle this issue in the years to come. Will Democrats prevail and get Roe v. Wade protections enshrined into federal law? Or will conservatives win with new abortion restrictions?
There still is a federal aspect to this.
The reality, though, is the abortion fight over the next few years is more likely to play out in the deserts of Arizona or the beaches of Florida than on the National Mall, with state legislatures and state Supreme Courts already modifying and clarifying laws. Harrington says opponents of abortion like him will use this week's march to rally supporters, including faith leaders, to help defeat expected ballot measures. Last year, his side lost elections in conservative states like Kansas and Montana.
We're going to have to fight back and defeat these ballot measures.
For supporters of abortion rights,
it's a challenging week.
This week's march is always tough to watch. Jamie Manson is the president of Catholics for Choice. She hopes people realize just how damaging the Supreme Court opinion has been for so many women. 13 states now ban most abortions.
Enormous suffering, especially for women, children, families who are already suffering for other injustices.
Manson had hoped the march would evolve this year and focus on life issues beyond the topic of abortion. Her message to faith leaders attending: remember, many of the people in your pews support abortion rights.
Pope Francis himself has said abortion is an important issue, but it is not the only issue.
Joe St. George, Scripps News, Washington.
The Montana Freedom Caucus held its first official event at the state capitol this week. It's a group of staunchly conservative lawmakers we've talked to, declaring themselves willing to hold the line and stand up to pressures on their key issues. As I've previously reported, the Montana Freedom Caucus is one of a growing number of state organizations modeled after the U.S. House Freedom Caucus. Congressman Matt Rosendale is a member at the federal level and recommended state lawmakers start one in Montana.
Now, very, very proud that they were able to get this group organized, and I just think that having that unified voice and getting that information out to the public is going to be very effective for the Freedom Caucus and very beneficial for the state.
State-level Freedom Caucus priorities include changing CPS regulations, supporting tax cuts, and several other key priorities. We have those on our website. Montana is now one of 12 states nationwide where a state-level Freedom Caucus has been set up. There are at least 14 members in the state legislature. We'll continue following their work. Coming up tonight at 8 p.m., you can stream Face the State on the Q2 streaming app. Tonight, our big topics are housing and the state budget, and we'll have the details on what happened this week at the state capitol. That show streams all through the weekend, so check the schedule and don't miss it. And President Biden is responding to criticism over how he handled classified documents after his term as vice president. As CBS's Jared Hill reports, this controversy doesn't seem to be getting in the way of his plans for 2024.
Touring storm damage in California, a frustrated President Biden.
You know, what quite frankly bugs me is that we have a serious problem here.
Wanting to focus on the state, answered a single question about the investigation into documents marked classified, recently found at his home in Wilmington, Delaware, and a D.C. office he used after his time as vice president.
We found a handful of documents were filed in the wrong place. We immediately turned them over to the archives of the Justice Department. There's no there there. Thank you.
This is the first time President Biden has addressed the controversy since Robert Hur was named special counsel to investigate. The White House has confirmed batches of classified documents were found on November 2nd, while lawyers cleaned out Biden's old office at his D.C. think tank, on December 20th in a garage at his house in Wilmington, Delaware, and on January 11th and 12th at his home library. None revealed until CBS News reported the initial November discovery 2 months after it happened.
Prior to an election, they kept it secret.
The focus on Biden comes as a separate special counsel continues the probe into former President Trump. The Justice Department says he took hundreds of documents marked classified with him to Florida when he left the White House, then denied repeated requests to turn them over. Jared Hill, CBS News.
And in an update to a story we reported yesterday, sources are saying President Biden is planning to announce a bid for re-election, quote, not long after February's State of the Union address. We'll be watching for that. And we have some good news for Montana College basketball fans. Big Sky Conference hoops return to KTVQ this weekend when the Grizzlies host the Bobcats. The women's tip-off Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. and the men follow that night at 7, so don't miss that. Still ahead on your